Well, hello, friends. I hope you're having a great day today. You know, it's a good day to believe God for great things. So why don't you go ahead and decide right now that you're not going to let anything stand in between you and your trust and faith and belief in God today, and know that He's going to do some awesome things in your life. Well, welcome to Tuesday's edition of Take 5. We are dealing with the subject that we have simply entitled Living by Faith. Hebrews 11 is where we've been pulling our text from for the past several weeks now, as we are looking at those individual characters that are mentioned there, then going back into the Old Testament, looking at their life and seeing how faith applies, looking at the plight of their life, and seeing how they ended up in that list of heroes of faith in Hebrews 11. As we go back and look at their lives, it helps us to see how we can compare our lives to them, how we can connect. We can see ourselves in the text there, and it helps us to understand that the same faith that they had, we can have that faith today, and God will honor that today just like He honored it then. We're dealing with a guy by the name of Barak. Barak is not very well known, and you can't talk about with Barak without talking about the judge and prophetess at that time, Deborah. They kind of run hand in hand in this portion of scripture here. There was somebody that said one time that Barak and Deborah must have been married. They were not married. Judges chapter 4 tells you the name of Deborah's husband, and I can't remember it right now. And I think it was a word that was about that long, so I'm really not sure. But anyway, it does tell us who her husband was. So Barak and Deborah were not married. Barak was the man that Deborah chose at the instruction of God to go out and gather 10,000 men from the tribes of Israel that were willing to help and to form an army and bring deliverance to Israel from the Canaanite king whose name was Jabin. Jabin had a very cruel military general whose name was Sisera. And between these two guys, they did as much as they could to oppress the people of Israel. And Barak and his walk of faith ended up being the very thing that brought deliverance to the tribes during that time. Now, I can't tell you the story of Barak and Deborah like I did on Sunday. It took me an hour to do that on Sunday, and we just don't have the time to do that. So I want to encourage you, go to the book of Judges, take chapter 4 and chapter 5. It tells you the whole story there. Blend them together because that's what you need to do. There's things in chapter 4 and facts in chapter 5 that need to be blended together. Blend those things together there, and you'll find out this story. Get it in a translation that you can read, that you can understand. If you're not careful, you'll go through there and some of those translations, especially the King James Version, and especially in chapter 5, you'll read it there and you'll just let all that stuff run together when he starts talking about the tribes, and it won't make sense. Find something that you can read so that it makes sense. And when the Bible makes sense to you, friend, then you'll begin to grow in that by your faith. So I want to just talk about the 6 things that I mentioned at the end of the message on Sunday that refer to Barak's faith. The things that we can look at that show us something where he had to have faith to believe God. Yesterday, we just talked about one of those, and that was faith brought Barak out of obscurity to select and lead the army of Israel when that army did not even exist at the time. Today, I want us to look at another fact of faith about Barak, and that's this. Faith helped Barak discern and obey the voice of the Lord through Deborah. Now, Deborah was the one that had given him the instruction. She was the mouthpiece for God. She was prophetess and judge in Israel at the time. And God had spoken to her and given her the instructions on what to do. And she passed that along to Barak. Now, Barak has to discern that what she is saying is the voice of God. And it takes faith to discern the voice of God. It did then, and I can tell you, it takes faith to discern it even now. for Barak to hear and obey the instructions that were given to him by Deborah, that were excessive as these were, he had to know what the will of God was. And God's not changed. He still speaks to people today, and he speaks to us through people, but we've got to have faith to be able to discern when God is speaking. You know, I was having a conversation with someone this past week, and as we were talking about getting clarity in hearing from God, and that's something that's so important, and it takes faith to get that clarity, because like it must have been for Barak, there can be dozens of voices that are speaking in our hearing and in our head that can absolutely confuse us to the point to where we don't know what is God and what is not God. If you consider Barak's situation just for a minute and what this prophetess was asking him to do, there is no telling the voices that were sounding off in his head. No doubt there was voices of fear. There was voices that said, this is crazy. There was voices that said, you know, people are not going to follow you. I guarantee you that there was a voice somewhere in there that said, man, this is crazy. You better not listen to this, especially coming from a woman. All of these voices were probably in there speaking in Barak's head, and he had to have faith to sort that out and know what was God and what was the flesh. And that's really no different than you and me today. All of the voices that speak in our head can be so confusing when we're trying to gain clarity from God, and it takes faith to know the difference. Now, I realize that we didn't talk about this Sunday, and we really don't even read about Barak doing this, but I'm going to, just kind of take a side road just for a minute and talk about this. When it comes to getting clarity from God and having the faith to do that, the best thing that a person can do is begin to fast. Fasting is something that just brings clarity. Now, the Bible didn't say Barak did that, so I'm not saying that he did. I'm just telling you that now, that fasting is something that helps bring clarity in hearing the voice of God. This happens to be our week of prayer and fasting here at the church. And if you're trying to get clarity, if you're trying to muster up the faith to be able to discern the voice of God and what He is telling you to do, whether it be through somebody that God is using to speak to you, a pastor, a preacher, or somebody that God is using, or whether God is just speaking to you directly by His Spirit, fasting is a way to bring clarity. It separates you from the flesh and from the world for a few moments of time and allows you to clearly hear what God is saying. That will build faith, my friend, and that will help you discern the voice of God so that you can respond immediately by faith and walk into the victory that He intends for your life. Why don't you try it this week? I promise you it will bring clarity. Fast and direct that fast to exactly what you're trying to hear from God. And I'm telling you, by faith, you'll be able to discern what God is saying. Well, hey, I've got to go. I look forward to being with you tomorrow on Wednesday's edition of Take 5. Until then, God bless you. Have a great day. Remember, friends, trust the Lord. He will never fail you.